Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday and happy equinox. Welcome to the Restoring Our Roots podcast, the voice of the Decriminialize Nature movement. This podcast is a gathering space where we explore the wisdom of entheogenic plants and fungi, the beauty of natural healing, and the importance of reconnecting with Mother Earth. Twice a month, we'll be hearing from visionaries, healers, and advocates who are working with entheogenic plants and fungi, exploring realms of consciousness and returning us to a balanced relationship with nature. My name is Larry Norris. I'm the co-founder of Decriminialize Nature. I'm also your host today, and I will help with people all across the U.S. to basically pass policy to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi. This includes mushrooms with psilocybin and psilocin, cacti with mescaline, plant combinations similar to ayahuasca that contain DMT, and plants that have ibogaine. So if you live in an area where the policy hasn't shifted yet and you're interested in making a move, please reach out to us at decriminalizenature.org, and we'll give you all the tools you need and the support you need to make this happen in your local jurisdiction. I'm also really happy to have Rachel on board with us today. As always, Rachel is doing the production on the backside. So thank you, Rachel, for all your help on this and for helping to inspire the show. Rachel will be posting these episodes on Spotify and a couple other podcast platforms in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. I know we're going live today on Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube Live. So if you see us on that channel, make sure to click on the subscribe button. And also, if you want to make a donation, please go ahead and click the donation button below as well to help keep our show going. Keep in mind, if everyone that's live, Rachel will be gathering any questions or comments. So please, if you have any questions or comments for Rebecca at the end or myself, please go ahead and put those in the chat box, and Rachel will bring those up in about the last 10 minutes of the show today. Really excited to have our next guest, who is Rebecca Wilkinson, who is the founder of the Psychedelic Art Therapy Network and has recently written a wonderful paper on the psychedelic art therapy approach, which we'll talk about a little bit today. She's also presenting 2 workshops coming up in April, one for clinicians at the Shulgin Farm and one with myself actually at the Berkeley Chapel of Flowers right next to Ashby Bart. So if you're in the area, come check us out. We'll be having a wonderful workshop on April 25th, exploring the different art styles of psychedelics, whether natural or synthetic. And we'll look at how this influences the artwork, or if this changes anything, or what kind of styles and sort of representations are coming from each of those modalities. I'm really excited for this workshop, and I'm really excited to have this conversation as well today with Rebecca. We've had known each other maybe about 6 months now, and had some really incredible conversations over the course of this time, both on psychedelics, art therapy, consciousness, and many other sort of areas. So we'll touch on quite a few of those today. But before we begin, how are you doing today, Rebecca?
I'm doing great, Larry. And I was just thinking, I'm so excited to run that workshop in April. Well, that's like a couple of days from now. But anyway, and collaborating with you has been really, really fun. I really respect and admire your work as well. So I just want to say that at the outset, that it's not just an honor to be here. It's just that you're doing this. And so being able to be a part of it feels like a lot of fun. So especially that workshop that we're going to run, I think that's going to be a blast. But yes, happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Very wonderful. Yeah, well, maybe just start off for the listeners, maybe share a little bit about your background, how you got here to the world of entheogens, and what sort of inspired you to do what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, I've been an art therapist for quite a while, for about since I was 28, so over 30 years. And I love my profession. I think it's really remarkable. And I won't go into a lot of detail. It has served me well, both personally and professionally, but I really felt like there were limits to how far we, with the tools, I'm going to say in the therapeutic world, have to really budge consciousness. And when I say that, I mean, for like, this is the way I experience it. It's very personal for me in the sense that I feel like we're sort of encased in these shells, and we get to know each other, but there's a way that we just cannot see beyond our facade. And art has helped me to see other people better, so that when somebody makes a piece of artwork, I feel like I get a glimpse of their spirit, their soul, their personality, whatever, what they're struggling with. But it still didn't sort of lower the veil. And I'm not saying that psychedelics do that to the extent that it solved all world problems. We're not there, but it does get us to something that we have a really hard time accessing in other ways. And so when I arrived at that conclusion, I really felt like I needed to just pivot to both personally again and professionally to psychedelics. And when I got to the world of psychedelics, which I'm going to say originally was about 8 years ago, but then I started to really look into this during the pandemic. I realized that art had sort of an elevated place, but it didn't have a practical place in either preparing or integrating psychedelic work. And so then I began to look around for other art therapists who might be doing this work. How is it that we can articulate this so that people who might be wanting to do art but not consider themselves to be an Alex Gray or a Pablo Amaringo or an Allison Gray, that they would be able to utilize art tools in order to process or prepare for a psychedelic experience. That was a really long answer.
No, that's great. Yeah,
Did,
thank you.
did it
Yeah,
hit it at all? Yeah. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, in a kind of bigger nut, but still a nutshell.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for those folks that maybe aren't really too interested in the field, what types of things would you be working with in terms of art therapy? Obviously, you're working with non-artists to bring forth some sort of creative process. Maybe explain that to folks that aren't too familiar with the art therapy world.
Yeah, well, I think of art as doing at its core two things. And one is when we do art, especially when we do something that has sort of a repetitive quality that I'm not talking about like I'm going to try to paint something epic, but maybe we're just scribbling or we're doodling or we're coloring. When we do that sort of thing, it literally relaxes a person. It's affecting their mind. And so we call that either affect regulation or the relaxation response. Sometimes when people do it for a while, they get into flow. But that is healing in and of itself. And you do not have to be any kind of an artist to do that sort of art. Then once you've made something, once you've created an object that is outside of you, so in making something, it gets externalized. So it was inside of my head, it was in my body. Didn't really have a way to put it into words, or I had words for it. But when you actually get it out into an object, then you can look at it from a distance. So we call that either expression, number one, like getting something out, and then externalizing. That object is then speaking back to you. It's communicating. So it's separate and it's communicating. So art can first be relaxing or healing, something that just helps us to feel better. And then it is a tool for us to learn about ourselves. And that also, you don't have to be, you can just draw stick figures, but my stick figure is going to be different than your stick figure and what I include around it. So in terms of how art is helpful, it helps us heal, and then it gives us a means to learn more about ourselves or a situation. So in psychedelic work, we might be when we're preparing somebody, we might be looking at how they interact with materials, what comes out of the art process. It's telling us something that we didn't know just from their verbal presentations. How do they manage uncertainty? And we know that when we get into psychedelics or excuse me, entheogens or anything that alters our consciousness, because it doesn't even have to be from a substance, it could be from breathing techniques, that sometimes it can be really disruptive. So we want to know how somebody responds to losing control, to being afraid. And art, because it is difficult to control exactly where it goes and how it turns out, gives you just a little bit of a glimpse of how somebody operates in the world.
Mhm.
So, and then after, usually, I mean, people will do art when they're under the influence of some altered state, but it's a little less common. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, but usually people are sort of internally focused, right? once they come out, art is also a way to just transition out of this state without having to articulate it or put it into words,
Hmm.
because we're not really quite cognitively back online. And so the place that art comes from is a deeper state of consciousness. It doesn't have that gating or control. So it just kind of bloop, goes around our verbal defenses. And then what you have is again something that's not a replica of your internal experience, right? When I have a journey, I'm not going to be able, even if I'm the most skilled artist, to exactly capture those ineffable elements. But I can create something that then I can dialogue with and learn from. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not good on the short answers.
No, that's great. No, this is
Tell me
I
if I
prefer
lose
that.
you at any
The
point.
longer the answer, the better, because it gives me more to like, kind of look into, and like kind of we can unpack a bunch of stuff. Of course, that means that the conversation will tangent in 100 different directions, but that's always
Excellent.
fun too. Yeah, no, just even kind of what you're saying there. I really like um, this re-enchantment of doodling, of scribbles,
Oh
of
yeah.
stuff that like people are like, oh, that's not really art, but like, yeah, actually, and I've seen many of those studies as well, and I'm a doodler myself. Like, it's so much easier sometimes for people to learn when you're doing some doodling. They found that there's
Doodling,
like an increase in the ability for people to intake information if they're just also focusing on, would you call it relax? You use the term for the doodle
the
process, but
relaxation, yeah, the relaxation response. It's really remarkable uh, that when we are engaged in that kind of activity, which is obviously different than scrolling or even trying to write or to create thought or hone thought. But when we're doing that sort of activity, it is literally affecting the brain, and it is allowing you to be present
Mhm.
in a way that, so you might even look like you're down here. Like when I teach classes and my students are on Zoom, I can tell when they're on their computer or they're doodling,
Mm.
because there's a way that they're just attuned when they're drawing. So I will often tell them, please draw, because it's going to help you stay longer and attuned better. So when I'm, in a long all day workshop, I'll draw the whole day, because it'll help me to be present. And often, again, that repetitive action. It's why coloring became such a craze,
Mhm.
because it provides a little bit of structure. I'm making a mandala. I made coloring books with mandalas, but it can be just, an open-ended image. Um, but not open, but without the constraints of a circle. So when you just color in, again, you're making choices. So it can be highly individualized, but it has a certain structure, and then people just fill it in, and again, it creates that relaxed state.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's, especially when we're talking about there's multiple fears happening here, right? When you're talking about art therapy, with psychedelic art therapy, there's the fear of like, oh, I went in this deep experience. There's the fear of if I'm going to represent this, and there's the fear of like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not an artist. I shouldn't be able to play
Ah,
with these
yeah.
tools. So it seems like with this doodle process or these other types of ways to democratize art again, make it available for people so that everyone can feel like, oh, okay, wait, I can participate in this. And then when you're talking about even that, artwork in general, especially when it comes to psychedelic artwork, is oftentimes sort of plastered on this 2D space where you have to sort of create depth that doesn't exist, or you have to like do optical tricks in order to make something happen there. And so no matter what, no matter even if you're the best artist in the world, trying to take one of these deep journey spaces and put it into even a 2D or 3D, kind of space, you're going to be missing out on a lot of things. So having that sort of comfort with just being okay with this creation process, the what are the emotions that I'm feeling here? What colors do I want to bring forward? How can I, and I know for the artwork that I've done, how can I um, like you said, almost stamp something into this plane so when I come back to it later, I can remember it. And I have paintings that I did in the past that don't have really anything. If you look at the painting, there's no symbols that really even directly related to the journey. But it brings up this, I have this one painting. I had this really deep insights around nausea and how to work with nausea in these ayahuasca spaces, and it's like, basically like this big space painting with two balloons flying through the sky, right? Okay, well, what does that have to do with that? But for me, it like taps me back in to these long lessons and insights I have about, pushing myself to the edge of nausea, because the further you go, the further you can get in your space. in terms of the inner journey, if you will. So I think taking people out of this mindset of like having to be good at it
Yeah.
frees them up a lot. And I think that's probably a big part of the facilitation process for an art therapist as well, is getting people out of those initial fears into the processing part, of the action oriented part of this, and that helps.
Yeah. It really is because, again, one of the most common misperceptions about art therapy is that it's either with people who want to do art or consider themselves to be artists. They're slightly different categories, right? But or children, or somebody who cannot speak or is not able to articulate well. But really, it is for anybody, and the job of the art therapist, and we're good at this, it's the same thing as therapy. People, if you sit somebody and you just say, tell me everything about yourself, starting from A to Z, and then we're going to fix everything. It doesn't work that way. Like we have to warm people up to it. And do you want to be playful for a second? Do you have a pen
Sure.
and a piece of paper near you?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do a little exercise.
Okay, all right, here we go.
All right. So I'm going to have you, Larry. We're both going to do this. Okay. We're going to take a moment to, Rachel can do it too if she wants, because she's listening. All right. So take a moment and just sort of check within and make a line for how you feel at this moment. And don't deliberate. It can be any kind of a line. But it's just going to be a line for how you feel at this moment. So do that first. Okay. All right. So the second one is take a moment to think about a symbol that represents who you are at this moment. Okay. Okay, so we can I don't know if Rachel can show hers, but we should definitely. So take a moment to hold yours up. Hopefully mine will show, because I think I've got that crazy. Can you see mine?
Hmm.
Good enough, right? And hold yours up.
Oh, mine doesn't. Mine, I think my paper is inside the background. So
Yeah, there we go. There we can see it. Yeah, and hold it up just a little bit more. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, and Rachel's got hers. Excellent. Okay. So notice that I mean, it's interesting, Rachel, you and I have two separate things, right? And then Larry's got one unified symbol. But I want to, you won't be able to see this for a moment, but notice that when you were thinking about how do I feel at this moment, you went inward, and you're just kind of checking in. But I could see Larry's eyes. I couldn't see yours, Rachel. But Larry looked up to think about what the symbol was. So the difference, this is really coming back to what I was speaking about earlier, that we're doing two different things. One is sort of an internal check-in and then a response. And then the other is thinking symbolically. So that both of these, though, are very unsophisticated drawings, right? But we each had a different representation. And, I could say, for example, to Larry, Larry, it's very interesting that you created one symbol. So you unified the two. That's uncommon, by the way. So that just, I can say that. I'm not going to analyze it, but I can say more people than not will create two symbols. Well, or make two. You unified the two, and then we could have a meaning-making conversation about it. But we spent less than a minute, sum total, on making any artwork. It's unlikely that we had sort of, I would say, a healing experience in terms of the dropping into the flow and the affect regulation, but we did check in with a feeling sensation. And it's very, very rare that people cannot make a line. I do occasionally run into people that don't make a line. And there are reasons for that, but almost everybody can just make a line for how they feel at that moment, and it will speak volumes.
Mhm.
So, and then, so, yeah, so go ahead.
No, it also seems like there's two different. Reviewing my process around it, it felt like there
Yeah,
was two different things too, because the first one was much more like just kind of draw the thing. It didn't
yeah,
feel like there was like this, just okay, what does your hand want to do? And there's sort of this openness
yeah.
there. And the other one was like,
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And no, it's perfect because people do have, like, did I get it right?
right.
Or, what do you mean by a line? But really just, and notice I don't say draw a line, I say make a line.
Mm,
And that's a slightly different because, you don't know what they're going to do. And some people will actually, make something out of something, if they get really creative. But the idea is that you're moving people out of thinking and into action. But
mm,
Larry, you're absolutely right that probably there was more weight and it mattered more. I
mm,
mean, I am asking you to create a symbol for who you are at this moment. They're almost the same thing. And I'll tell you a very short little funny story about this. I told my husband I was going to psychedelic science, and I said we need to do some kind of art experiential on the exhibit hall that gets people, immediately stops them. They immediately do a piece of artwork, and they can be gone from the table in less than a minute. But there's something that draws them, and so we got these post-its. And we did this. And so I told my husband, we're going to do this, draw a line for how you feel. And it was something that a student of my business partner had come up with. And my husband said, well, why don't you have them draw a symbol for who they are at this moment? And I said, well, why would we do that? It's the same thing. And then I thought about it, and I thought it absolutely is not, because one is just, it is being with who you are at this moment, but it's not thinking about who you are at this moment.
mm,
So you're literally, if we saw brains firing going off, there would be different parts of the brain. So you are accessing consciousness
mhm,
in different ways. And then, but we get a witness to what conscious look like at two different moments for this one human being.
mhm,
And then with the three of us together, we get to experience three different consciousness. And that's the really fun thing about it, is that you instantly see, oh, Rachel's is is not surprising, in some ways. Some art, by the way, is to me is kind of like a phone call to a stranger. You've never met them, and you pick up the phone, and you have this impression of who you think they are, and then you meet them and you say, oh my gosh, you are exactly like I thought you would be. Or you say, oh my goodness, you are nothing like who I thought you would be. That's art to me. So,
yeah. And what's even interesting about this too is that I imagine that all of us initially for a half second, like you, Rachel, you reflected on this later, like, oh, line, we think, okay, straight horizontal or straight vertical. All three of us did some curvy representation,
yeah,
right? So none of us stuck with. So also probably fun to see how that sort of I don't know, I guess Sheldon can call it the morphogenetic field, what things that we sit into that like all of a sudden kind of shift and shape how it is that we represent our art, even if it's something that's
yeah,
quick and fast. And I imagine then now scaling that up to psychedelics, in the same sort of scenario, we have a variety of people now coming now and reflecting on their inner experiences, maybe not in like a what does this symbol represent or what symbols is there, because then again makes that in that thinking, but what does this feel like or what types of things are you sort of connecting with there? And you have a variety of people in there. I wonder if similar experiences will come down because people have, hundreds of experiences to draw from
yeah,
oftentimes. Will those similar it's happened with integration circles a lot where you have people that'll will do a circle and four people are sharing some sort of similar theme. Does this
absolutely.
happen a lot with your art? You'll see that people come down without even realizing it are
It's
doing some sort of
uncanny.
similar theme. Yeah.
It really is. And it's one of the reasons why we're kind of pushing for more art, because there's a couple of things that happen if at a certain point you will begin to recognize, even though a line is a line, right? And my line was like this, and yours was kind of like this. And Rachel, let me see yours again. Yeah, so hers goes like this, and then she's got a butterfly. Okay, so this loop, like curvy lines, means something. Like you don't need to be an art therapist. I lost my pen here. To understand that if I draw this right here, can you see it, by the way? Because I lost
Yep.
myself. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So these are kind of jagged and they're crossing over. You can see the pressure there, that you know that that's different than this and this,
Mhm.
these three. This has curvy lines. It's still, has some motion to it, but there is a way that visual imagery, I'm not going to analyze it per se, but it does speak universally.
Mhm.
And we know this to be true, that imagery is universal. This is something that Jung tapped into when he was talking about archetypal symbols, that we recognize myths. We have universal ways that we understand relationships. Um, and we also have a way that we understand visual information. And then when we are in groups, there similar themes may emerge because we are influencing each other. And when you see that in the imagery, like you might see imagery, I used to have this happen a lot where I wouldn't have anybody make artwork with words in it for months, and then in one group three people would say words and or would use words in their imagery, and there would be one or two similar words, and
Mhm.
it would just be uncanny because that wouldn't have happened except in this particular situation. And then you ask why. You don't really get a linear answer because we can't exactly determine why. At that moment, this group made moons with a star shooting across it, but they did. And moon wouldn't be that surprising, but a moon with a star shooting across it, well, that's something. And so yes, the way that it brings a universality
Mhm.
uh to, so we recognize, I mean, it's replicating that quality that psychedelics have, which is, I am not just me, I am all of us, and I see me in you, and you see me in me.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
mean, you see you in me.
And then, what you're speaking to now just really, to me at least, sort of suggests that one of the really good modalities to be working with, if you're working with psychedelic integration, preparation, or what have you, is this art therapy modality, or art in general, maybe not art therapy, but art in general, to be able to work and sort of unpack some of these things and get some guidance from your experiences. Now, I know you're in the art therapy world, which should be like all over, super excited about psychedelics. How is the reaction in the art therapy world, and what things are you doing to kind of make sure that they're understanding psychedelics? I know you just wrote a really great paper
Oh yeah.
on the process. Maybe you want to touch on that, and also just sort of speak to how the art therapy world in general, are they receiving it well? Are they not so much? Or what's kind of the how's that working?
I think there's a little bit of pushback, and that's kind of fun. I'm not. I kind of enjoy not provoking, but keeping a therapist really on top of what really helps people, because we get really stuck. We're human beings, therapists. We get really stuck in our paradigms. So the first time that I brought up psychedelics, I had written about positive psychology quite extensively before I got into psychedelics, and positive psychology caused a lot of pushback because uh, be, essentially because people thought it was toxic positivity, just put on a smiley face and let's pretend, and let's put up our affirmations. So when I got into psychedelics, everybody was like, okay, Rebecca's, uh, fanning the flames again. But thankfully, I have collaborated with some excellent art therapists who have been thinking about this for a long time as well. And so that Alyssa Gursky helped me write this paper. Katie Bragagnolo, also one of our founders, has been thinking about this for many years. So we kind of put our heads together and we said, it doesn't really matter if art therapy, if psychedelics becomes a uh, a modality that is widely embraced by art therapy, but our clients will get there much quicker than we do. And it was the same thing with Zoom. Therapists were apoplectic about the possibility of going online until COVID hit, and then they didn't have a choice. And but our clients were ready because they needed it, right? And so our clients are going to tell us that they need psychedelics because they're going to be struggling with something, or they're going to know somebody who's struggling and they're going to say, I've heard about this. So that was our intention first, was to hit the art therapy field and say, you need to know about psychedelics.
It's
So we
happening
wrote that.
anyway. It's happening anyway, so you might as well
It's
get prepared.
happening anyway. So get some familiarity, and then we're going to tell you what's going on with psychedelics and how psychedelics and art therapy are doing very similar things. They really do. It's kind of interesting. And then we're going to pivot to the psychedelic world, which we're already doing, and say, you really need to know about art therapy, and basically say this is how you can do it. Which people like the Groff School, they have been using it essentially to help people do that transition out. They give everyone, if they're either going through holotropic breath work or originally LSD, that they would give them a mandala and have them just basically process the experience, just like I had you make the line. Don't think about it too much. Just use these materials and make a response. Then what they don't do as much of, which I think is a loss, is then let's look at it and not analyze it as in me analyzing you, but let's look at what your image told you. If it is speaking for consciousness and it had a voice right now and it stood right here and it said, I am agitated, I am crossing lines. I wouldn't say what I am. I would just say I'm lines that are crossing over in a strong, heavy marks. Okay, what does that communicate to you? It looks like maybe agitation or energy. Like you want the person to kind of analyze what it is that they've made, but you do want to take them through that process. Like, now that you put this on paper, what does it tell you? Not what did you intend? Oh, I meant to make a pretty sun. I don't know what that is. What do you actually see here? And then you might say, isn't it interesting that you thought you were making this, but this came out instead? If that had meaning, what would it be? And then that you can use any model. Then it could be the inner healing intelligence, or if you were using IFS, it would be true self and parts. You just apply whatever paradigm is to help that person make meaning.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I want to talk a minute about mandalas and that whole process. But before we
Sure.
get into that, I want to just touch briefly on this positive psychology idea. It's so interesting because I know that there, and maybe you've heard this in the research or not, but my ancestry is from Finland, and they have this word sisu, which is sort of it's not really definable in any other language. It's not translatable easily, and I've heard a lot of people in the positive psychology world were looking at Sisu as this sort of unique Finnish trait that would speak to something about, like, well, what is this thing that, and it sort of represents what they call the Finnish spirit, right? That's, at least for the Finnish people, that's what they say.
I love
And
it.
and the other ways that I try and define it is like sort of like a sacred tenacity, or like a spiritual determination, right? And it's not so much that was positive, it's like the extra little bit of gas in your tank, that when
Yeah.
everything is like hit the fan, and everything is collapsed and you can't do anything more, somehow magically you have a little extra in your tank that pushes you through to that next
Mhm.
spot. It's not
Yeah.
really like positive necessarily, because maybe you're going through some suffering, maybe you're going, I mean, obviously it's always, especially with some of the history of Finnish people and all that kind of thing, there is these moments of like really really difficult things happening, right, and having to push through it, but sort of not really seeing it as like, oh, everything's love and light, but like, how do we get through the tough stuff,
Yeah.
and how do we find that little bit of extra energy to make it through? So I just want to sort of acknowledge that in terms of your conversation around positive psychology, because it's amazing. That's how far away is that from the placebo effect? Like, what's
Yeah.
happening with the placebo effect, right? Is somehow we're convinced that this thing is going to heal us, and then we heal, even though perhaps there's nothing there to heal us. It's just our mind healing that process.
Yeah.
It's
The mind
right.
is really powerful. And by the way, I would call that grit essentially, not that that probably trivializes it a little bit or restricts it, but yeah, there's a woman named Angela Duckworth who wrote a lot about that cultural grit and personal grit.
Sure thing.
I would say that positive psychology, what I've loved most about it is I worked for so many years with people with severe mental illness, and it was never through their diagnosis and their pathology that you found the way to help them. It was always through their strengths and what gave them a spark. Was it, being among their family, animals, um, music, art, nature, but that is the way that you help people that are challenged, and people have different capacities for resilience, and so you really have to know. You can't assume that everybody is resilient. You have to know how resilient they are, and in order to do that, you're not looking at their illness. You're looking at their resilience, whatever measure that is.
Mhm.
And so that was the core of it. And art could reveal, like, I was just writing with my business partner about positive psychology. We have to update a chapter that we wrote 10 years ago, and she and I worked with people with severe mental illness at a psychiatric hospital in DC, and we would have people that were vegetatively psychotic or schizophrenia. So for years, they would not utter a word, not a word. And they would just be sort of a husk of a person, and you gave them art supplies. And suddenly you see something's going on in there,
Mhm.
and you don't exactly know because they're never going to tell you, but you know that this is not a dead human being. And they've just been completely dismissed by society. So now, the other thing that you were alluding to is the placebo effect or affirmations, or the idea that we can tell ourselves, um, if we continue to tell ourselves things that are authentically possible, like, I'm never going to be Angelina Jolie. So I shouldn't have a motto on my mirror that says, you can be Angelina Jolie, you can be rated the top sexiest woman of dot, 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 or whatever it is. That's not realistic. But I can say I am aging well. I have energy and these things that if I continue to plant that seed in my mind and overcome what we call the negativity bias, which is my mind telling me I'm not doing well or finding the negative things. So yeah, it's really about what helps people be most resilient and shine.
Mhm.
What helps them to be the best version of themselves despite their limitations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that. That's so deep in terms of what our minds can do, and then also to what we're tapping into. I even think about, to kind of go back to the mandala question. Like, here we are. You said something with the scribble. Like, what is consciousness trying to show us? Which really
Yeah.
suggests that it's almost got an agency outside of us. Like, it's trying to show us something. We're not trying to show ourselves something. So I think that's really interesting when you look at Groff and you look at Jung and you look at the Red Book and you look at all the mandalas that are happening there. It is this process of, I think even Jung called it, the mandala is the symbol of the self, correct? Isn't that what
Yeah,
his?
and he I mean, the interesting thing is it really does. You always want to discover the person's belief system, but I always thought it was kind of interesting, and that's why I'm excited about our workshop, because we're going to be talking about synthetic medicines versus natural, let's say. And there are some people who believe that when you take psychedelics, you go in and you find the inner healing intelligence that comes from humanist principles. But Groff, gave it that language, but it originates from that era of psychology where they were really looking at the idea that there was a core benevolent self, as opposed to that kind of Freudian concept that we are in essence, primitive drives that are fighting against each other. So, but there's so he's saying you're going in and you're discovering that personal wisdom, but you're also tapping into an archetypal and a transpersonal wisdom. So then the people that might believe, for example, that ayahuasca is the mother ayahuasca, they might say you're tapping in to the mother, and that what is coming out is not you, it's not your inner healing intelligence, it's the medicine and its message. And it either one is not right or wrong. It's simply your belief system, and or perhaps, like, if you're working in a tradition, then it would be within that tradition.
Mhm. So when people are crafting mandalas for, let's say they are doing this for post integration, or they just feel the urge to do it, do you have any sort of again tips for people that are new to this if they want to sort of start out mandala process? Is there any sort of structure that people can? Is there a format that you can sort of share, or is it kind of pretty free flowing, or is there kind of a best practices for getting into mandala type work, or
Well, this is what I normally do. If now this is particular to me, this is not the way to do it. But when I first work with a person, so this would be pre-medicine, but I oftentimes end up working with people who have already done the medicine, so I'm not helping them with anything. But if I do have a chance to do it before, the mandala, I love mandalas because it is it gives the essence of a structure, or the impression of it. It's just a circle. So I'll give people a piece of paper and I'll say, make symbols for the things that are important and impact your life. And there are two things. One is important, what matters to me, and the other is what impacts me, because it could be something bad that impacts you. So you're not just looking for the good stuff. And I'll give them a piece of paper that has a circle like this, you know the circle, and I'll say, use this piece of paper. And they look at the circle and they say, why do I have to use the circle? And I say, I don't know. Do you have to use the circle? So then I'm finding out, like, are they going to say, well, you told me to do it? Or they're going to say, screw the circle, flip it over. They're going to say, oh, thank goodness for the circle, because I hate a blank piece of paper.
Mhm.
And then they might ask me, well, do I stay inside or do I go outside? And I say, I don't know, because I want to see what they respond. And then I'll say to them, if they say, no, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, I'll say, really, just let the image speak to you. Let this speak to you, and trust that whatever you do, even if you do nothing, is helpful. It's probably going to be helpful for you to actually make artwork, because we get to hear from a part of you that isn't censored by language. So to the audience that's listening to this, I would say, you either use a piece of paper that has a circle in it or don't, but allow yourself to respond to that idea, make symbols for what's important to you, and then put them on a piece of paper. And then when you make the image, then hold it up for yourself when it's done. And you're going to be surprised by some things. And so when something surprises you, or it's different than you expected, ask the question, if that had meaning, what should it be? Or what would it be? So that would be at the beginning. Did that make sense, by the way? Do you have any?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but some people might just have people just make marks, and I'm doing this because a lot of times people will have somebody draw like a scribble like this. This is a directive in the MAPS handbook. By the way, their integration handbook comes from an art therapist named Valerie Schumann, but it's a technique that that we use a lot. So you've got these scribbles. And so I might have you make a scribble and then say, okay, now look in here and see if you can develop an image from this. So this is unconscious. And then I'm applying my conscious mind to create a symbol. And so I decide that I'm going to take this and there's a figure in here. So I took that and I enhanced the figure here. So somebody else might have made a cat. Rachel might have made a cat or something like that. She would have put little ears on top of it like this, you know. And I would say, well, tell me about that creature, you know. So so that that's another technique. Like that one is a really great technique because you're pulling for unconscious material and then you because the scribble is, remember, it's like the doodle, but then you're putting meaning into it by creating something that you identify in the image. um, so that might be something that you could do both at the beginning. That's a really great technique to do at the end too, because again, you just kind of capture a feeling. And then after somebody's done that for a while, you say, now let's go in and see if we can find an image here. And we could say that that was a communication from your experience, right? Because you're just post dropping in, and then you come out, and then this is what your mind delivered to you. And so Jung thought that it was channeling, and he believed that he was actually channeling a character. Groff often talks about that as well. That there were certain artists that believed that they were actively channeling something that was coming from within.
Yeah, I know some, and maybe Groff or Young have talked about this before as well. I'm not sure, but I know some people that will also look at mandalas as a way to, and this has come out a little bit of even the Kalindi community out of Detroit, where they see sort of mandalas not as a flat thing on paper, but as a three-dimensional space that you can move into, and then you can create a map of places you're going to go in that mandala so that you, when you're going in your next journey, don't get confused with the ancestor realm from the past lives realm, from the multidimensional, transcending time and space realm, from the blah blah blah. So almost like they would go utilize the mandala as a map to go into it, as now not a two-dimensional plane, but a three-dimensional structure to go into, and then visit different rooms depending upon what their intention in the journey is, and really sort of utilize the mandala as like a terrain almost that makes it easier for them to access it instead of having to go through all the sort of levels of it. It's like, oh, I know this is located here. I can always find it by accessing it here. And so also seeing it as like a mandala is like a map of consciousness or a map of self or a map of
Beautiful.
places to go to. So it's both this sort of representation of what's going on, but also then a place that then has some sort of static, placeholders for, you know, realms, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's that I have never heard of that, by the way. It sounds absolutely spectacular. I'm going to learn more about it now that you mention it. What I think is fascinating about the mandala, and this again goes back to consciousness, is that it means nothing other than circle, but we imbue meaning into the circle because it is it's a perfect container. It's the shape of the eye. It's the shape of the face. It's the first actual controlled symbol that we make is a circle before we make like a square or a triangle. And so there, and then the word, even though it means just circle, also came to mean in much older practices to be basically the universe or everything, the cosmos, because it's a perfect form in some ways. And so we endow it with extra special meaning because it is archetypal.
Mm.
So that those people are using it in that way is incredible, but it it just lends itself to that.
Right, there are a lot of, because as it's such a universal theme, you can do a lot of things with that. Sort of the key. Once you have the key to unlock the space, there's a lot of things that can happen there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
and
love
uh,
that.
and we've seen that even just between with even just the conversation between Jung and Groff and their differences, and of course the old ancient Tibetan mandalas and everything, which are so complex
Yeah.
there's so many characters happening there and so many things going on there. It speaks to this repeated, or sort of this symbol that transcends space and time in and of itself. So.
Yeah. I should tell you, by the way, and maybe when you get your links up, that there is a really lovely, like 10-minute video that Groff has talking about mandalas. He's
Mm,
being interviewed by somebody who loves them. And so he's differentiating between Tibetan mandalas and other kinds of mandalas. And
yeah,
so we can put that up there. It
great.
still holds tried and true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, great. Yeah, and when I mean, so now you're introducing this idea of the art therapy world. You're also introducing art therapy to the psychedelic world that may not be too familiar with it. How are you seeing this in terms of the next iterations, or how are you seeing them flow together? How are you seeing the next version of psychedelic art therapy integration work coming to fruition here?
I think that different people in the art therapy world that are actively working with psychedelics have slightly different agendas, let's say missions, but ours is really to get art in an approachable and operational way into integration and preparation work. So it would be, 3 to 5 techniques. We'll probably do continuing education trainings around this, where you would just walk away with 3 to 5 ways that you can help your clients use art as a means of accessing. We call it, basically capturing the download, if you will, or a little more playfully effing the ineffable. But it's a way to get it out and then be able to engage within it. So so I would say that we want to get it into the training of psychedelic practitioners so that they feel equipped to be able to do this within the scope of their competence. And because it's doable. You don't have to be an art therapist to get people to be able to dialogue with themselves about their own imagery, or dialogue in a group about what do we see here? What did we have in common? And the barriers are fairly easy to overcome. I don't know how to draw. That's fairly simple. You just do it with those people, and then you teach them, and then giving them very, very simple tools to be able to talk about it. How do you ask somebody a question about their artwork? So that, I think, that's predominantly my agenda, is to be able to get it into the tools that therapists are using, uh, and then, yeah, for us to be able to you said democratize art. That has been an agenda my entire life. Like, this is not for people who are talented. It is for everyone, because it is something that we naturally do. We communicate with each other, we connect that way, we express. And art is amazing. And the most incredible art that I have in my life is made by people who were not trained artists. And some of the most tedious artwork that is in this world is art that I've made as a really talented artist. And I'm like, there's nothing, there's no passion, it didn't capture something. So you don't need to be a talented artist. That's the whole reason outsider art was so incredible.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're running out
outsider
of
art.
time, I know, by
Yeah.
the way. So yeah,
Yeah, and outsider art is so close to visionary art, and those like have they're almost like sharing a little nugget of the Venn diagram there.
absolutely.
So yeah,
At one point, I want to do like a visual map of how all of these, like creativity, for example. Creativity doesn't have to be about art. And there are people, Bruce Damer, Manesh Gurn, they're doing incredible work around creativity. But art makes people more creative. It's not always the other way around. So how can we be linking these people having similar conversations? Art therapy, creativity, psychedelics, consciousness, all of that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Rebecca. I know we do have about 10 minutes to go or so. But before we jump into Rachel's question, this is a question we ask all the guests here on the show, because I think it's always interesting to hear the different perspectives, although they've all kind of lined up for the most part. But the question we ask everyone is, when I say the words decriminalize nature to you, what does that mean?
What a great question. It means to remove the shackles from something that naturally uh, exists outside of human experience. I think humans are part of nature, but it is. I mean, we create these artificial constraints around something that is natural, that is meant to be, that exists, and so like I see a plant just being hampered, and humans as well. So it's restricting beyond necessary things that intrinsically have worth and existence.
Mhm.
That I should have prepared, but I think it's better when you don't, right?
That's great. Yeah, that's
Um,
the whole idea, right? Yeah, just to hear right off the cuff what everyone thinks. What does it mean? What's the first impression you
yeah,
hear those words?
yeah. Now I'm yeah. That would be my answer. Yeah, like it feels like imposing constraint against something that, in its essence, is not designed to be constrained.
And so decriminalization will be the release of that process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Decriminalization would be allowing it to naturally thrive.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. What a great conversation we've had. I've learned a lot about art therapy today and mandalas and everything else as well. And I'm sure our conversations will continue on into the wee hours of many, many, many years from now. So
Yeah,
thank you for
thank
being
you,
here.
Larry.
Yeah. And Rachel, why don't you jump on? And I know you had a couple questions you want to answer
I
or
do. Yes.
ask.
Yeah. What a lovely conversation. I love art in all its forms. Like, I mean, Larry, I read comic books and cosplay and all that kind of stuff. So all the
Yay.
imagery and all, like,
Oh, it's
how we can
wonderful.
speak about the unconscious world and just that line exercise was just wonderful too. And I think people were following along. So it's just fun for have this be the live show and have that engagement as well. So thanks for bringing that to the show,
Excellent.
Rebecca. It was great.
Yeah.
So actually, my first question was actually to you, Larry. Before I get into my bigger question for you,
Oh, this is
Rebecca,
new.
because it's a shorter one too. Because you brought up the word sisu.
Yeah.
Have you watched the movie?
I have not
Sisu?
watched the movie,
Okay,
but
I have. Yes, there's like it's
okay,
like I think it's a
like a
revenge
war
flick.
movie or something
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
it's like it's so if you think of like John Wick or these types of like tough older guys who are like, I'm out of the game. I don't really want to be here anymore. But then like you killed my dog, so now I have a vendetta against you. So the idea behind Sisu is just this older guy who just like doesn't give up. Like he has like a goal, a mission, and no matter what happens, even though you're like down on your knees, I can barely walk, but I'm still, if I can still move,
Mhm.
I'm still gonna push, right? And I think for me, in terms of loving comic books and that stuff, I love Sisu as a word in terms of like a cultural, like I love like grit is good, toughness, but just like that mental resilience, right? Just to, when you're in the darkness and you're all alone, like what are you gonna do? It's like, well, I got me, right? And that is more than enough. So for
I
people
know.
to just believe in that.
Yeah, and I would say with Sisu, it's even a little bit more. It
Yeah.
almost goes over into the beyond me. It's like
Yeah.
I don't even know where I'm drawing this from anymore. That's why I said sacred tenacity or
Yes.
spiritual determination. Like there's some other level of something happening that you're like, I don't have anything left. How can I still move
Well,
forward?
you know, like
You know?
those
So
like
yeah,
divine sacred warriors, right? Who like,
right,
it's more than just even yourself. You're doing this
right,
for like
yeah,
a
yeah,
bigger purpose. And so if the
Yeah.
universe is counting on you, then yeah, you're gonna go further than what you even think is possible. So
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I love that. But yeah, the movie, you should watch it. It's good.
I
It's
should,
good.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
definitely
like
take.
you amp up, like yeah, inner
Yeah, I want to
toughness.
see it now. I'm
Yeah.
going to be, I know what we're doing tonight. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
and then
ahead.
also bring that word in more conversations, right? We need better words like that to talk about things. We have so many like negative words, let's say, but if we have words that are like, okay, you're going through a tough spot, like delve into your sisu, delve into your like toughness, your heroic inner self, like, and you can get through it, you know.
Mhm.
Um, that was the
Beautiful.
first question. My question for you, Rebecca, was more along the lines of mediums of art,
Mhm.
because I think I really love what you were. Larry asked you about like like this idea of like non-artists, but I love how it's almost like, well, that's not really a thing. Like we all are artists. I think it's a matter of like you're finding like what your medium is, or like comfort or practice or things like that. So for you and all of your experience, or even in your own personal relationship with art, do you have any favorite mediums that you like to work with? Like, I know drawing is one of them, but drawing can be very expansive, right? You have like doodling, sketching, or painting, or like finger painting, or even things that just abstract mandala or sacred geometry. Is there something along the lines of, in terms of like mediums, you find that you've like working with in terms of speaking to the unconscious?
So I always answer before I do a personal answer. I've always got my art therapy cap on. And this is something that is a little more sophisticated in the art therapy world, but we don't teach about it because it is a little abstract. But different media do have different properties. So,
Mm.
for example, although you can be kind of free form with a pen or a pencil or a marker, it is much more restricted because it's taking all of this medium to a fine point.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
because it's a fine point, it's always more controlled. Unless, of course,
That's
you're
a good
like
point.
smashing a
Yeah.
piece of paper. But even that. Now, so we have something called the expressive therapies continuum, which
Mm.
talks about the properties of media, excuse me. And so paints are the most fluid. Watercolors, that sort of thing. Probably
Yeah.
watercolors, one of the most fluid, but also very loose clay. And clay is really regressive. So a lot of people say, don't give clay to somebody with bipolar disorder because, they're going to be eating in it. It's going to be all over the walls, or paints.
Interesting.
But clay also has the property to reconstitute. It can be very mushy, but then when you bring it together and create form, and Larry, like at that point, we're working in three dimensions, right?
Mm-hmm.
um
Love
so
that.
so those are things. Art therapists, I remember there was an art therapist who he actually teaches at Naropa, Michael Franklin. He talked about the ways that art therapy kind of has a signature art form because we're always doing like mandalas or drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Draw how you feel today. Draw yourself as an animal. Draw a symbol for this. So what we recommend is play.
Yeah.
Play with art. If you are the art therapist, then, or the art, excuse me, the facilitator, you would put maybe 3 to 5 different things, but slightly more controlled to begin with, because you want to see just how people operate with things that with a continuum. So pastels,
Yeah.
chalk pastels are looser than oil pastels. And you just kind of see how they work. Some people will be like, oh, chalk pastels, powdery, ugh, you know. Um, Again, the mandala is more structured. Giving an instruction is more
Mm.
structured. Some people follow an open studio model, which would be walk into a studio. What attracts you?
Mm-hmm.
What are you gravitating towards? Then let the person lead themselves. If you're really worried that the person might not be able to generate anything from within, you might use collage material.
Mm.
And there are some people like Kylia Taylor, and I know an a therapist in DC who works with soul collage. And Groff did that a little bit. So that's a collage method that's kind of in an archetypal
That's
theme. So, but more controlled is going to allow people to go in quicker and easier. So tell them what to do, but it's also going to be less open-ended. So now what do I like? I was trained to be a really skilled painter, but I get super, super perfectionistic about it. And I get really tight. And so I really like to draw, and I enjoy my drawing, but I don't feel a need to make it perfect. And
yeah.
so I have become an illustrator more, not an illustrator, but a drawer. And it's much less valued in the art world, but I
Mm.
get a lot more pleasure out of it.
I love that so much. Just because
Yeah.
in comic books, right, it's always a synergy between the writer and the illustrator. right?
Yeah.
It's the two of them together, those two consciousness. So the person who's drawing Superman and the person who is creating the dialogue and the words, and together you make that character. And so just it's something I think really special, Rebecca, when you're able to bring form to the formless and like
It
yeah.
is incredible. And you want to try to sort of feel like the most that you're trying to do is always let the person direct. But there's another famous art therapist, Judy Rubin, who said a framework for freedom.
Yeah.
So you want to, like, you could even think about this in the plant world. Like you might nip something a little bit to promote its growth, or you might contain something a little bit so that it gives it the opportunity to thrive. So not too much. And that is, unfortunately, that is the skills that art therapists, we've been doing this for so long that we just kind of spot it. But you start out with basic materials and you're probably going to get somewhere,
I love that so
Yeah.
much. That's such a great answer, Rebecca. Thanks for that. And I love
You're
that like this
welcome. Thanks. Great
conversation has made
question.
it art, like everyone's an artist, just to like find like what vibes with you. And I think like even in asking that question when you don't know is you're already starting that journey. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so thanks for that.
That's great questions, by the way. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank
Yeah.
you. Back to you,
Yeah.
Larry.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it. Yeah, really been great, Rebecca. Is there anything that you would like to cover that we don't think we've touched on, or maybe we do it in a future show, or anything you just like to address to the audience? So while we have the last few minutes here.
No, that like it'd be fun to come back to putting these worlds together, like the creativity world. I felt like that would be a really fun one to really be talking about what is art in the psychedelic world and how do we begin to connect the dots so that it isn't something extra. So if you're up for it, I'm always up for a good conversation with you. And now, Rachel, that was huge fun. So if you want to just kind of hang out together and go deeper, I'm all for it.
That sounds great. Yeah, maybe we can do that in the fall time. We're gonna have a little bit of a break in the summertime, but fall time comes up and we can have a nice little focus specifically on creativity, which I think would be great. Is
Yeah.
there go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to the audience too, just I I really believe that this matters, and so I just make a point of being available to anybody who has a question. So you can find us on the Psychedelic Art Therapy Network, but really just reach out to me, and Larry, you'll help people do that. But because I think it's through conversation that people begin to understand better what is available to them in the world. So I want people to just say, wait, this part, like you did, Rachel, and then just give me a call. So
Yeah, that's great. And actually, that was gonna what I was gonna ask you at the end there is like, how do people contact you? Psychedelicarttherapynetwork.com or .org? Is that a website? That's your website,
yeah,
right?
well, you can always write info at psychedelic arttherapy.org, psychedelicarttherapynetwork.org. You can
.org.
just put info and that'll
And
come
you're
to
on
me.
social media under the same names as well?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, there's a Facebook group. Yeah, they'll be able to find me. I mean, I have a private practice. It's under a different name, Creative Wellbeing Workshops. That was that was what I did for the last and continue to do. But I'm available online. And so anything through the Psychedelic Art Therapy Network is going to end up with me. I'll be able to follow through. We have, a contact form and it'll tell people. Yeah.
Great.
Or tell me.
And we'll probably put some of those links in the caption as well of the podcast as well.
Yeah,
So
and I'll get that link to the Groff mandala. That's a lovely one. And I will say also on the Psychedelic Art Therapy Network website, we have videos, we have reading material, like everything that we can make available to you. We've got a list of practitioners who are doing this work. So we really want somebody to kind of, I imagine it as being like a house, and somebody comes into this large living room and we say, hey, come and have dinner. And if you really want to talk about this, over in that salon, they're talking about that or like that. But, there would be this sort of hub where people could just kind of hang out and then they would see, oh, there's this, and this.
Great, wonderful. Well, again, it was such a pleasure to hear from you today and have another deep conversation. I look forward to many more. So thank you, Rebecca, for being here. As a reminder to everybody out there, we usually go live every 2 weeks. So you'll be seeing our next show will be on April 5th. In between all that, you'll see us live on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And in a couple weeks from now, this show will be on Spotify, Apple, and other podcast platforms. And then we'll start putting it out in terms of some social media clips in a few weeks following that. Our next show on April 5th will be with Sebastian William Foster, who is an attorney in South Africa who is addressing psychedelic policy through the lens of cognitive liberty or freedom of thought. So it's going to be a really interesting sort of philosophical conversation around what is the freedom of thought, what does that mean, how are rights protected, et cetera, and how does it fall into the categories of psychedelic policy. I think cognitive liberty was originally coined by Richard Glenn Bohr here in California in the mid 90s, and then it's kind of now gone all across the US and the nation, actually, and the world, I should say, into a concept that we can really start to bring forward in terms of the importance of freedom of thought, especially in today's era where it can be, both infringed upon through algorithms and also being, sort of restricted by, laws and things that criminalize psychedelic plants and mushrooms, for example. So check us out there. If you haven't already subscribed, give us a subscription, and then you'll find out when the new episodes are coming up and the new things happening on there. Come this summer, we'll take a little break, and then we'll start. We have about 3 more shows, I think, before the end of the summer, and then we'll go and start our next season up, season 4. So this is getting to the tail end of season 3, which has been an incredible run here. Season 4 starting in the fall time, probably around September 2026. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. And until next time, tune in, stay rooted, and let's grow together. Happy Equinox. Have a good one. Bye bye now.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.